The blood-curdling scream echoed through Prescott's dusty Main Street, stopping Genevieve Foster in her tracks as she exited the general store, her basket of provisions clutched tightly in her gloved hands. The sound was unmistakable, a woman in danger, and without hesitation, Genevieve dropped her purchases and rushed toward the commotion. It was 1878, and Prescott, Arizona Territory, had grown from a frontier outpost to a bustling town with aspirations of refinement. But beneath its veneer of civilization, it remained as harsh and unforgiving as the desert that surrounded it. Genevieve had called this place home for all of her 23 years, and while she understood its ways, she had never quite accepted them. "You thieving whore." The accusation came from Herbert Wilson, the banker's son, his face contorted with rage as he loomed over a young woman cowering against the wall of the saloon. "I know you took it." The woman Genevieve recognized her as Mary Holbrook, a widow who'd recently started working at the laundry, shook her head frantically. "No, sir. I swear I didn't take anything." Her voice trembled as violently as her body. "My watch is missing, and you're the only one who was in my room," Herbert snarled, raising his hand to strike her. Genevieve moved without thinking, inserting herself between Herbert and Mary. "Mr. Wilson, that is quite enough." The crowd that had gathered fell silent. No one interfered when Herbert Wilson was in a rage. His father owned half the businesses in town and held the mortgages on most of the rest. Herbert's eyes narrowed. "Miss Foster, this is none of your concern. Step aside." "I will not," Genevieve replied, standing tall despite being nearly a head shorter than him. "Mrs. Holbrook is clearly terrified, and you have no proof she took anything." Herbert's face reddened further. "My father will hear of this impertinence." "Your father's store depends on our good graces, or have you forgotten?" "I have forgotten nothing, Mr. Wilson," Genevieve said evenly. "Including the basic decency my parents taught me. If you've lost your watch, report it to Sheriff Drake, but you will not assault Mrs. Holbrook in the street." The crowd murmured, half in admiration, half in disbelief at Genevieve's boldness. Herbert Wilson was not a man to cross, and everyone knew it. "Perhaps," came a drawling voice from behind Genevieve. "The lady's right, Wilson. Seems to me you're making quite a spectacle over a timepiece." Genevieve didn't turn to look at the newcomer, but she recognized the voice. Isaac Tucker had ridden into town just 2 weeks prior, a quiet, imposing figure who kept to himself, but had already earned a reputation as a man not to be trifled with. He worked at the Peterson Ranch outside of town and only came in occasionally for supplies or a drink. Herbert's gaze shifted from Genevieve to the man behind her, and something like uncertainty crossed his face. "This doesn't concern you either, Tucker." "Maybe not," Isaac replied, stepping forward to stand beside Genevieve. Now she could see him tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "But I can't abide seeing a man threaten women in the street. It ain't civilized." Herbert glanced around, suddenly aware of how many witnesses were present. "Fine, I'll speak to the sheriff, but you haven't heard the last of this, Miss Foster." With a final glare, he stalked away, the crowd parting before him. As the onlookers dispersed, Genevieve turned to Mary. "Are you hurt, Mrs. Holbrook?" "No, Miss Foster, thank you," Mary whispered, eyes downcast. "But you shouldn't have. Mr. Wilson is powerful, and your father—" "Don't worry about my father," Genevieve assured her, though her stomach knotted at the thought of Herbert making good on his threat. "Why don't I walk you home?" After ensuring Mary reached her small rented room safely, Genevieve retrieved her scattered purchases and headed toward her family's home above Foster's general store. She was nearly there when Isaac Tucker fell into step beside her. "That was a brave thing you did back there, Miss Foster," he said, taking her basket without asking. Genevieve glanced at him, unsure whether to be irritated or grateful for his assistance. It wasn't bravery, Mr. Tucker. It was simple human decency. A slight smile touched his lips. In my experience, Miss Foster, those are often one and the same. He nodded toward the store. Your father's establishment? Yes, we live upstairs. She reached for her basket, but he held it firmly. Allow me, he said, climbing the steps to the storefront. As they reached the door, it swung open to reveal Jonathan Foster, Genevieve's father, his expression grim. Genevieve, he said tightly, Herbert Wilson was just here. He said you publicly humiliated him. His gaze shifted to Isaac. Mr. Tucker, I presume. Isaac nodded, handing Genevieve's basket to her father. Sir. Father, Herbert was about to strike Mary Holbrook over a missing watch. He had no proof she'd taken anything. I couldn't stand by and let him harm her. Jonathan sighed, ushering his daughter inside. Mr. Tucker, thank you for escorting my daughter home. Good day. Isaac tipped his hat. Mr. Foster, Miss Foster. With a final glance at Genevieve, he turned and walked away. Inside, Jonathan closed the door and turned to his daughter. Genevieve, what were you thinking? The Wilsons hold the note on this building. They extend us credit for our inventory. If they call in their debts— I know, Father, Genevieve interrupted, setting her basket on the counter. But would you have me watch a man strike a defenseless woman? Of course not, her father replied, running a hand through his graying hair. But there are ways to handle such situations without making enemies of the most powerful family in town. Herbert Wilson has always been a bully, Genevieve said firmly. Someone needs to stand up to him. Before her father could respond, the bell above the door jangled and Margaret Foster swept in, her arms laden with packages. Jonathan, you'll never believe what I just heard. Everyone in town is talking about Genevieve standing up to Herbert Wilson. She set her parcels down and embraced her daughter. Are you all right, dear? I'm fine, Mother, Genevieve assured her. It wasn't as dramatic as people are making it out to be. I heard that cowboy from the Peterson ranch stood with you, Margaret said, eyes bright with curiosity. The handsome one with the dark eyes. Isaac Tucker, Jonathan supplied. And yes, apparently he did, which is the only reason Herbert didn't make more of a scene, I'd wager, Margaret sighed. Well, I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies, but Genevieve, you must be more careful. The Wilsons, I know, Mother, Genevieve said, weary of the refrain. The Wilsons practically own this town. They do not own us, Jonathan said firmly, surprising both women. But they do have considerable influence and we'd be foolish to ignore that fact. He squeezed Genevieve's shoulder. I'm proud of you for standing up for Mrs. Holbrook. Just try to be diplomatic about it next time, Genevieve nodded, relieved that her father wasn't truly angry with her. She helped her mother with the packages, and the three of them set about preparing the evening meal, the incident seemingly put behind them. But late that night, as Genevieve lay in bed, she couldn't shake the memory of Isaac Tucker standing beside her, his quiet strength a reassurance she hadn't known she needed. That was a brave thing you did, he'd said, and for some reason his approval meant more to her than it should have. She rolled over, forcing her thoughts away from dark eyes and broad shoulders. Herbert Wilson's threat lingered in her mind, and she knew that tomorrow would bring consequences. She just didn't realize how severe they would be. The morning dawned bright and hot, typical for June in Arizona territory. Genevieve rose early, as was her habit, and helped her father open the store before preparing for her day at the schoolhouse, where she assisted Miss Pemberton with the younger children. She was arranging primers on the desks when Sheriff Drake appeared at the schoolroom door, his expression solemn. Miss Foster, I need you to come with me, he said without preamble. Genevieve straightened, her heart pounding. Has something happened, Sheriff? Is it my parents?" "Your parents are fine, Miss Foster," Drake assured her, "but there's a matter that requires your attention at the town hall." With growing apprehension, Genevieve followed the sheriff through Prescott's busy streets. People stopped to stare as they passed, whispering behind their hands. By the time they reached the town hall, Genevieve's palms were damp with nervous sweat. Inside, the town council was assembled, along with several prominent citizens including Archibald Wilson and his son Herbert. The elder Wilson sat at the center of the long table, his fingers steepled before him as he watched Genevieve enter. "Miss Foster," he said coolly, "thank you for joining us." "I wasn't aware I had a choice, Mr. Wilson," Genevieve replied, trying to keep her voice steady. A thin smile crossed the banker's face. "Indeed. Well, let us get straight to the point. You have been accused of behavior unbecoming a teacher in our community, specifically of publicly slandering my son and interfering in a private matter." "I was preventing your son from assaulting a widow in the street," Genevieve said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "I fail to see how that constitutes slander." Herbert's face darkened, but his father held up a hand to silence his protest. "Miss Foster, this town has certain standards. Those who educate our children must be above reproach. Your impulsive actions yesterday demonstrate poor judgment at best." "And at worst?" Genevieve asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "At worst, they demonstrate a moral character unsuitable for shaping young minds," Archibald replied. "The council has voted, Miss Foster. Your services at the school are no longer required." The blood drained from Genevieve's face. "You're dismissing me for preventing a man from striking a woman." "We are dismissing you for public insubordination and a failure to respect the social order of this community," Archibald corrected. "This decision is final." Genevieve glanced around the room, looking for a sympathetic face, but found none. Even Mayor Thompson, who had always been kind to her, avoided her gaze. "I see," she said finally, her voice remarkably steady given the turmoil inside her. "Then I shall trouble you no further, gentlemen." With as much dignity as she could muster, Genevieve turned and walked out of the town hall. The morning sun seemed mockingly bright after the dimness inside, and she stood for a moment on the steps, unsure where to go or what to do. "Miss Foster?" She looked up to find Isaac Tucker leaning against a hitching post, his expression concerned. "Mr. Tucker, I didn't expect to see you in town today. Came in for supplies," he said, straightening. "You look like you've had some bad news." Genevieve laughed, a brittle sound that surprised even her. "You could say that. I've been dismissed from my position at the school, apparently defending Mrs. Holbrook demonstrated poor judgment and a moral character unsuitable for shaping young minds." Isaac's jaw tightened. "That's not right." "No," Genevieve agreed, "it isn't. But it seems there's nothing to be done about it." "There's always something to be done," Isaac said, offering his arm. "May I walk you home, Miss Foster?" Genevieve hesitated, then placed her hand on his sleeve. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Tucker, and please call me Genevieve." "Isaac," he replied with a slight smile. "Seems foolish to stand on formality after all this." As they walked through town, Genevieve was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. By evening, everyone in Prescott would know she'd been dismissed, and why. "You know," Isaac said quietly as they neared the general store, "where I come from, standing up for someone who can't defend themselves isn't considered poor judgment. It's considered the mark of a decent human being." "And where is that, Isaac? Where do you come from?" Genevieve asked, genuinely curious about this man who had twice appeared when she needed someone most. A shadow crossed his face. "All over, I suppose. But I was born in Texas. My father had a small ranch there before the war." Before Genevieve could ask more, they reached the store, and her mother appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and relief. "Genevieve, Sheriff Drake was just here looking for you," he said. She broke off, noticing Isaac. "Mr. Tucker, isn't it?" "Madam," Isaac said, tipping his hat. "I was just escorting your daughter home." Margaret's eyes darted between them. "Well, that was very kind of you. Genevieve, your father and I need to speak with you." "I already know, Mother," Genevieve said quietly. "The council dismissed me from the school." Margaret's face fell. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry." Isaac cleared his throat. "I should be going. Genevieve, Mrs. Foster." With a final nod, he turned to leave. "Thank you, Isaac," Genevieve called after him. "For everything." He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "What you did, Genevieve, that makes you brave, not wrong. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." With those words hanging in the air between them, he walked away, leaving Genevieve to face her parents and the consequences of her actions. Inside the store, Jonathan Foster was helping a customer, but his eyes found his daughter immediately. As soon as the customer left, he locked the door and turned the sign to closed. "Genevieve," he began, but she held up a hand. "Please, Father, don't say I told you so." "I couldn't bear it right now." Jonathan shook his head. "That's not what I was going to say at all. I was going to tell you how proud I am of you." Surprised, Genevieve looked up to see her father's eyes shining with emotion. "You're not angry, at my daughter for having the courage of her convictions?" "Never." He embraced her tightly. "The Wilsons may control this town's money, but they don't control its conscience. You did the right thing, no matter what they say." Relief flooded through Genevieve, and she returned her father's embrace. "Thank you, but what will we do? If they're angry enough to have me dismissed, they might call in their loans," Jonathan finished for her. "They might. And if they do, we'll face that when it comes. But I won't have you compromise your principles out of fear." Margaret joined them, wrapping her arms around both her husband and daughter. "We'll be all right, Genevieve. We always have been." For the first time since leaving the town hall, Genevieve felt the knot in her chest loosen slightly. Her parents' support meant everything, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of the Wilsons' retribution. She was right. The next morning, a letter arrived from the bank, formally demanding repayment of the loan on the store building within 30 days. Jonathan read it silently, his face growing pale before passing it to Margaret, who gasped. "They can't expect us to repay the entire amount so quickly. It's impossible," she exclaimed. "That's precisely the point, Margaret," Jonathan said grimly. "They don't want repayment, they want the store." Genevieve, who had been inventorying stock, approached her parents. "What's happened?" Jonathan handed her the letter. "It seems the Wilsons have decided to make an example of us." Genevieve read it quickly, her heart sinking. "This is my fault." "If I hadn't—" "Stop right there," Jonathan interrupted. "This is not your fault. This is the act of petty, vindictive people who use their power to punish those who dare to challenge them. I won't have you blaming yourself." "But what will we do?" Genevieve asked, the enormity of their situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. "Where will we go if we lose the store? It's everything we have." "We'll figure something out," Jonathan assured her, though the worry in his eyes belied his confident words. "We still have a month." A lot can happen in a month. But as the days passed, it became clear that nothing would happen to change their circumstances. The Wilsons had effectively turned much of the town against them. Business at the store dwindled as people, fearful of being seen as sympathetic to the Fosters, took their trade elsewhere. Even longtime friends began to avoid them, crossing the street rather than stopping to chat. Only Mary Holbrook, the woman Genevieve had defended, remained steadfast, visiting the store daily despite the risk to her own precarious position. And occasionally, Isaac Tucker would ride into town, purchasing supplies and lingering to talk with Genevieve while her parents pretended not to notice their growing attachment. 2 weeks after receiving the bank's letter, Genevieve was alone in the store when Isaac arrived, his expression more serious than usual. "Genevieve," he said without preamble, "I heard about the bank's demand. Is there anything I can do to help?" She shook her head, touched by his concern. "Unless you have a small fortune hidden away, I'm afraid not. We've tried everything approaching other lenders, seeking investors. No one is willing to cross the Wilsons." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I don't have a fortune, but I do have a proposition for you, for your family." "A proposition?" Genevieve repeated, curiosity piqued. "I've been saving to buy my own place for years," Isaac explained. "I have enough for a down payment on a small ranch. There's one for sale about 50 miles north of here, near a settlement called Cedar Springs. Good land, water rights, and far enough from Prescott that the Wilsons' influence doesn't reach." Genevieve's heart quickened. "Are you suggesting my family move to Cedar Springs?" "I'm suggesting we go together," Isaac said, his dark eyes holding hers. "Your father knows merchandise and trade. Cedar Springs needs a general store. You have experience teaching. They need a schoolteacher. And I need," he paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I need a partner, Genevieve. Someone brave enough to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. A partner." Genevieve repeated, unsure if he was proposing a business arrangement or something more personal. Isaac stepped closer, taking her hand in his. "I know it hasn't been long, and I'm not a man of many words, but I've never met anyone like you, Genevieve Foster. You're the kind of woman a man would be proud to build a life with." Genevieve's breath caught. "Isaac, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," he said simply. "It wouldn't be easy at first. The ranch needs work, and Cedar Springs is still growing. But we'd be free of the Wilsons, and we'd be together." "And my parents?" Genevieve asked, though her heart was already racing at the prospect of a life with this steady, principled man. "There's a small house in town that would suit them, and plenty of need for your father's business sense," Isaac assured her. "I wouldn't ask you to leave them behind." Genevieve hesitated, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. I need to think about this, Isaac, to talk to my parents." He nodded, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. "Of course. I'll be in town until tomorrow. Just don't take too long to decide. Time is something your family doesn't have much of right now." After Isaac left, Genevieve sat behind the counter, her mind whirling. She'd known Isaac Tucker for less than a month, yet the thought of a life with him filled her with a sense of rightness she couldn't explain. Was it merely the desperation of their situation that made his offer so appealing, or was it something more? That evening, after the store closed, Genevieve shared Isaac's proposal with her parents. To her surprise, they didn't seem shocked. "We've seen the way he looks at you," Margaret said with a small smile, "and the way you look at him when you think no one is watching." "But it's so sudden," Genevieve protested. "How can I be sure?" Jonathan chuckled. "Your mother and I knew each other for exactly 3 weeks before we decided to marry. When it's right, it's right. But Cedar Springs, leaving Prescott, this is our home." "A home that no longer welcomes us," Jonathan pointed out gently. "Cedar Springs may be small, but it sounds like a place where a family can start fresh. And Isaac Tucker strikes me as a man of honor. He wouldn't have made such an offer lightly." "You're not concerned that this is all happening because of our troubles with the Wilsons?" Genevieve asked. "That it's convenience rather than—" "Well, love," Margaret took her daughter's hand. "Genevieve, that man has been finding reasons to come to town and see you since the day you stood up to Herbert Wilson. I don't think convenience has anything to do with it. And what about you both? Could you really leave Prescott, start over somewhere new at your age?" Jonathan laughed. "At our age," Genevieve, we're hardly decrepit. Your mother and I came to Arizona Territory when it was little more than wilderness. We built a life here, and we can build one in Cedar Springs if need be." His expression grew serious. "But this decision must be yours. Do you have feelings for Isaac?" Genevieve thought of Isaac's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd stood beside her without hesitation when she needed an ally. She thought of his hands, calloused from honest work, and his eyes, which missed nothing but judged little. She thought of his words, "That makes you brave, not wrong." "Yes," she admitted finally, "I do. But is that enough to base a marriage on?" "It's a good start," Margaret said. "The rest comes with time, with building a life together. But Genevieve, don't marry him just to solve our problems. That's not fair to either of you." "I wouldn't," Genevieve assured her mother. "If I accept Isaac's proposal, it will be because I want a future with him, not just an escape from our present difficulties." She slept little that night, weighing her options, examining her feelings. By morning, she knew what her answer would be. Isaac was loading supplies into his wagon when Genevieve found him outside the livery stable. He straightened when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral, though she could see the hope in his eyes. "I've been thinking about your proposition," Genevieve said without preamble. "And?" Isaac prompted when she didn't immediately continue. Genevieve took a deep breath. "And I have some conditions." A smile tugged at the corner of Isaac's mouth. "I expected no less. What are they?" "First, we need time to know each other better before we marry. I propose a 6-month engagement during which we'll all move to Cedar Springs and establish ourselves there." Isaac nodded. "Reasonable. What else?" "Second, I want to continue teaching. If Cedar Springs doesn't have a school, I'll start one." "The settlement needs a school," Isaac confirmed. "The children there are getting by with whatever education their parents can provide." "Good. And third, this is a partnership in every sense. We make decisions together as equals." Isaac's smile broadened. "Genevieve Foster, I wouldn't have it any other way." He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Does this mean you're accepting my proposal?" "It does," Genevieve said, surprised by the certainty she felt. "I accept Isaac Tucker." He raised one of her hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "You've made me a very happy man, Genevieve. I promise you won't regret this." "I know I won't," she replied, and she meant it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The news of their engagement spread through Prescott like wildfire, eliciting reactions ranging from shocked disapproval to quiet support. The Wilsons, of course, were furious, but there was little they could do to stop the Fosters from leaving town before the 30-day deadline. Preparations for their departure consumed the next week. Jonathan sold as much of their inventory as he could, using the proceeds to purchase supplies for their new beginning. Margaret packed their personal belongings, keeping only what was necessary and cherished. And Genevieve, caught between excitement and trepidation, tried to envision the life that awaited her in Cedar Springs. The evening before they were to leave, Mary Holbrook came to say goodbye, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't know what I'll do without you, Miss Foster," she said, embracing Genevieve. "You're the only one in this town who ever stood up for me." "You'll be all right, Mary," Genevieve assured her. "And if things ever become too difficult here, you'll always have a place with us in Cedar Springs." As Mary left, Herbert Wilson appeared in the doorway, blocking her exit. "Well, if it isn't the laundress and the schoolteacher who thinks she's too good for Prescott," he sneered. Genevieve stepped forward, placing herself between Herbert and Mary once more. "Mr. Wilson, we have nothing to say to each other. Please let Mrs. Holbrook pass." Herbert moved aside with exaggerated courtesy, then fixed his gaze on Genevieve. "I hear you're marrying that saddle tramp Tucker." How fitting a woman with no sense of her proper place and a man with no roots or reputation. "Isaac Tucker is worth 10 of you, Herbert Wilson," Genevieve retorted. "And I consider it a blessing that we're leaving Prescott, if it means never having to endure your presence again." Herbert's face darkened. "You'll regret those words, Miss Foster. Prescott may be rid of you, but Arizona territory isn't that big. Our paths will cross again, and when they do, you'll find me just as willing to stand up to bullies as I am today," Genevieve interrupted. "Good evening, Mr. Wilson." After Herbert stormed off, Mary squeezed Genevieve's hand. "Be careful, Miss Foster. He doesn't forget slights easily." "I won't let him frighten me, Mary, not any more." Genevieve smiled reassuringly. "Now go home and lock your door. And remember what I said about Cedar Springs." Dawn broke clear and cool as the Fosters loaded the last of their belongings into the 2 wagons that would carry them to their new home. Isaac had gone ahead to finalize the purchase of the ranch and prepare for their arrival, promising to meet them halfway. As they prepared to leave, a small crowd gathered to see them off. Some were longtime customers come to say goodbye, others merely curious onlookers. Sheriff Drake approached as Jonathan climbed onto the lead wagon. "I'm sorry it's come to this, Foster," the sheriff said quietly. "For what it's worth, I think the council was wrong about your daughter." Jonathan nodded. "Thank you for saying so, Sheriff. Perhaps someday Prescott will be the kind of town where standing up for what's right doesn't get you run out on a rail." "Perhaps," Drake agreed, though he didn't sound convinced. "Safe travels to you all." With final goodbyes said, the Fosters set out, leaving behind the only home Genevieve had ever known. As they crested the hill that would take Prescott out of sight, she turned for one last look at the town below. "Are you having second thoughts?" her mother asked from beside her. Genevieve shook her head. "No, just saying goodbye to what was and looking forward to what will be." The journey to Cedar Springs took 4 days, with Isaac meeting them as promised at a trading post halfway. Genevieve found herself watching him as he rode alongside their wagons, noting the easy way he sat his horse, the alertness with which he scanned their surroundings, the gentle smile he reserved for her alone. With each passing hour, her certainty grew that she had made the right choice. Cedar Springs proved to be smaller than Prescott, but no less determined to carve civilization out of the wilderness. Nestled in a valley with a reliable water source, the settlement consisted of about 30 buildings clustered around a central square, with farms and ranches spreading outward. Isaac's ranch, their ranch, Genevieve reminded herself lay 3 miles from town, a modest spread with a small but solid house, a barn and corrals. The house had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a front room with a stone fireplace. It was simple but well built, and Genevieve could already envision how it would look with curtains at the windows and a garden out front. "What do you think?" Isaac asked as he showed them around. "It needs work, but it's a good start." "It's perfect," Genevieve assured him, meaning it. After the uncertainty of the past month, the solid reality of this place, this home, was exactly what she needed. The house in town that Isaac had mentioned for her parents was equally suitable, a compact dwelling behind what would become Foster's general store. Within days of their arrival, Jonathan had leased the storefront and begun ordering inventory, while Margaret set about making their new house a home. Genevieve split her time between helping her parents establish their business and working with Isaac on the ranch. The physical labor was harder than anything she'd done in Prescott, but she found satisfaction in it, in mending fences, planting a vegetable garden, learning to care for the small herd of cattle that was the ranch's primary income. In the evenings, she and Isaac would sit on the porch of what would eventually be their home, watching the sunset and talking. He told her about his life before Cedar Springs, about growing up in Texas. about losing his father in the war, about drifting from ranch to ranch across the West, always working for others but dreaming of his own land. "I was beginning to think it would never happen," he admitted one evening, a month after their arrival. "That I'd spend my whole life working other men's cattle on other men's land. And then I rode into Prescott and saw this fierce, beautiful woman standing up to a man twice her size, and I thought, there's someone worth knowing." Genevieve laughed. "I was terrified, you know. I just couldn't stand by and watch him hurt Mary." "That's what makes you special, Genevieve," Isaac said, taking her hand. "Most people can talk about what's right, but when the moment comes to act, they hesitate. You didn't." Their eyes met, and Genevieve felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer evening. Without thinking, she leaned toward him, and Isaac met her halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with a hunger that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I know we agreed on 6 months," he murmured, "but I'm finding it very hard to be patient, Genevieve Foster." "As am I," she admitted, breathless. "Perhaps we don't need quite so long to be certain after all." The next day, Genevieve broached the subject with her parents. "Isaac and I are thinking of moving up the wedding," she said as they closed the store for the evening. "We've been here over a month now, and I'm more sure than ever that this is right." Jonathan and Margaret exchanged a glance. "Are you certain, Genevieve?" her father asked. "There's no rush." "I am certain," she replied firmly. "I love him, Father. I know it's happened quickly, but I do. And he loves me. Why wait when we both know what we want?" Her parents couldn't argue with that logic, especially as they had seen for themselves the growing bond between their daughter and Isaac. Plans for a September wedding were quickly set in motion, with Margaret taking charge of preparations and Jonathan offering to build the couple a proper bedroom set as a wedding gift. News of the engagement spread through Cedar Springs, and unlike in Prescott, the reaction was universally positive. The small community welcomed the Fosters and embraced Genevieve's plan to start a school. Several families with children offered to help convert an unused building into a classroom, and by mid-August, Genevieve was teaching again, her heart full as she watched eager young minds absorb knowledge. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm. Isaac worked the ranch during the day while Genevieve taught, and in the evenings and on weekends, they worked together, building the foundation for their shared future. The 6-bedroom set that Jonathan was crafting took shape in the workshop behind the store, each piece lovingly made from the finest wood he could obtain. As the wedding day approached, Genevieve felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. The pain of leaving Prescott had faded, replaced by excitement for the life ahead. Even the memory of Herbert Wilson's threats had receded, overshadowed by the happiness of her new beginning. Then, a week before the wedding, everything changed. Genevieve was walking home from the schoolhouse when she noticed an unfamiliar wagon outside the general store. As she drew closer, she saw a woman climbing down a woman she recognized immediately. "Mary," she called, quickening her pace. "Mary Holbrook, is that you?" The woman turned, her face lighting up with relief. "Miss Foster. Oh, thank goodness I've found you." Mary looked exhausted, her clothes dusty from travel, her face drawn with fatigue. "What are you doing here, Mary? How did you find us?" "It wasn't hard," Mary said, accepting Genevieve's embrace. "Everyone in Prescott knows you went to Cedar Springs. I had to come, Miss Foster, after what happened." A chill ran down Genevieve's spine. "What happened, Mary? Are you all right?" Before Mary could answer, Jonathan emerged from the store. "Genevieve and Mrs. Holbrook, isn't it? What brings you to Cedar Springs?" "Father, Mary needs rest and food before she tells us anything," Genevieve said firmly, noting the way the other woman swayed on her feet. Let's get her inside." Once Mary was settled at the table in her parents' kitchen with a bowl of stew and a cup of coffee, Genevieve pressed gently for answers. "Now, Mary, what's happened? Why have you come all this way?" Mary took a deep breath. 2 days after you left, Herbert Wilson's watch turned up. It had fallen behind his dresser. He'd never been robbed at all. But instead of apologizing, he acted as if it didn't matter. Said I was probably a thief anyway, just hadn't been caught yet. She paused, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. Then last week he came to the laundry, drunk and angry about something. He started making demands. Said since everyone already thought the worst of me, I might as well earn my reputation. When I refused, he became violent. Genevieve's hands clenched into fists. "Did he hurt you?" "He tried," Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I managed to get away, but not before." She pushed up her sleeve to reveal a dark bruise on her forearm. "I went to Sheriff Drake, but he said it was my word against Herbert's and without witnesses." "That coward," Jonathan muttered. "He knows perfectly well what kind of man Herbert Wilson is." The next day, I was dismissed from the laundry. No explanation, just told my services were no longer needed. Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I had nowhere else to go, Miss Foster. You said if things became difficult, I could come to Cedar Springs. I hope you meant it." "Of course I meant it," Genevieve assured her, covering Mary's hand with her own. "You can stay with us as long as you need." "Actually," Jonathan interjected, "we could use help at the store. Business has been better than we expected. If you're interested, Mrs. Holbrook, the position is yours." Mary's expression transformed from despair to hope. "Really, Mr. Foster, I'd work very hard, I promise." "I know you would," Jonathan said kindly. "And there's a small room behind the store that you could use until you find more permanent accommodations." As they made arrangements for Mary's employment and lodging, Genevieve couldn't shake a sense of unease. Herbert Wilson's behavior was escalating, and she feared Mary might not be the last person from Prescott to seek refuge in Cedar Springs. That evening, Genevieve shared Mary's story with Isaac as they walked along the creek that bordered the ranch. "I'm not surprised Wilson would do something like that," Isaac said grimly. "Men like him think they're entitled to whatever they want, whoever they want." "I'm worried, Isaac," Genevieve admitted. "The things Herbert said when we left Prescott, he sounded almost threatening. And now this with Mary. What if he doesn't stop there?" Isaac wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Prescott is 50 miles away, Genevieve. Wilson may be a bully, but even he wouldn't come all this way just to cause trouble." "I hope you're right," Genevieve said, leaning into his embrace. "I just can't shake the feeling that we haven't seen the last of him." Her premonition proved correct sooner than either of them could have anticipated. 3 days before the wedding, Genevieve was at the schoolhouse, preparing lessons for the following week, when the door burst open. Herbert Wilson stood in the doorway, his face flushed with anger or drink, possibly both. "So this is where you've been hiding," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Playing schoolteacher in this backwater, pretending you're respectable." Genevieve rose from her desk, heart pounding but voice steady. "Mr. Wilson, you're interrupting my work. Please leave." Herbert laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Still giving orders, I see. Did you think you could humiliate me in front of the entire town and there wouldn't be consequences? Did you think I'd just forget?" "I didn't humiliate you, Herbert," Genevieve said calmly. "You did that yourself with your behavior toward Mrs. Holbrook, a behavior you continued after I left, from what I hear." Herbert's face darkened. "That whore got what was coming to her, and so will you." He moved toward her and Genevieve backed away, keeping the desk between them. "If you touch me, you'll regret it," she warned. "This isn't Prescott. You have no power here." "Power?" Herbert laughed again. "I don't need my father's money to deal with you, Genevieve Foster. All I need is this." He patted the revolver at his hip. Genevieve's mouth went dry. "You're threatening to shoot me. For what?" "For standing up to you months ago. That's madness, Herbert." "Not you," Herbert said, his smile chilling. "Your precious Cowboy. I saw him ride into town an hour ago. I think it's time he and I had a conversation about respecting one's betters." "Isaac has done nothing to you," Genevieve protested, fear gripping her heart. "This is between you and me." "He stood with you that day," Herbert snarled. "He made me look weak." "No man does that to a Wilson without paying the price." Before Genevieve could respond, Herbert turned and stalked out of the schoolhouse. She stood frozen for a moment, then galvanized into action, grabbing her shawl and racing toward town. Cedar Springs was busy that afternoon, with wagons lining the main street and people moving between the various businesses. Genevieve scanned the crowd frantically, looking for either Isaac or Herbert. She spotted Isaac first, emerging from the general store with a package under his arm. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived as she caught sight of Herbert approaching from the opposite direction, one hand hovering near his gun. "Isaac!" she shouted, pushing through the crowd. "Isaac, behind you!" Isaac turned at the sound of her voice, his expression changing from welcome to alarm as he saw her distress. Then his gaze shifted past her, and his face hardened. "Wilson," he said, setting his package on a nearby bench. "You're a long way from Prescott." Herbert stopped a few yards away, his stance aggressive. "Not far enough to forget what you and your woman did to me, Tucker." By now, people had noticed the confrontation and were moving away, creating a clearing in the middle of the street. Genevieve reached Isaac's side, her hand finding his arm. "He's drunk, Isaac," she said quietly, "and armed." Isaac nodded slightly, keeping his eyes on Herbert. "Go inside, Genevieve. This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't," she retorted. "He came here because of me. Because I stood up to him." "Is that what you think?" Herbert laughed. "I came because a Wilson always settles his debts, and you two owe me more than you can pay." "We owe you nothing," Isaac said evenly. "Whatever grievance you think you have, it's in your head. Go back to Prescott, Wilson. There's nothing for you here." Herbert's hand moved to his gun. "I'm not leaving until I get satisfaction." "Stop this, Herbert," Genevieve pleaded. "This is insanity. No one needs to get hurt." "Someone always gets hurt," Herbert replied, his eyes never leaving Isaac. "That's the way of the world. The strong hurt the weak. The rich hurt the poor. The Wilsons hurt anyone who crosses them." "Is that what your father taught you?" Isaac asked, his tone conversational though his body remained tense. "That might makes right. That money buys you the privilege of hurting others." Herbert's face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare speak of my father, you saddle tramp. He's worth 100 of you." "A man's worth isn't measured by his bank account, Wilson," Isaac said quietly. "It's measured by how he treats others, especially those who can't defend themselves." "Fine words from a man about to die," Herbert sneered, his hand moving to draw his gun. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Herbert drew, but Isaac was faster, his hand a blur as he reached for his own weapon. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously, echoing through the suddenly silent street. Herbert staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as a red stain spread across his shirt front. Isaac remained standing, though Genevieve saw him wince and press a hand to his side. "Isaac," she cried, reaching for him as Herbert crumpled to the ground. "I'm all right," Isaac assured her, though his face had gone pale. "Just grazed me." People rushed forward, then some to Herbert, others to Isaac. The town doctor pushed through the crowd, kneeling first beside Herbert, whose breathing was shallow and labored. "Someone fetch Sheriff Taylor," the doctor called, pressing a bandana to Herbert's wound. "And get this man to my office," he added, gesturing toward Isaac. Herbert shot first, several voices called out. We all saw it. Tucker was defending himself. Wilson came looking for a fight. Sheriff Taylor arrived moments later, quickly taking control of the situation. After hearing multiple accounts of what had transpired, he turned to Isaac. Looks like clear self-defense to me, Tucker, but I'll need your statement once the docs patched you up. Isaac nodded, leaning heavily on Genevieve as they made their way to the doctor's office. Behind them, Herbert was carried in the same direction, his fate uncertain. The doctor's examination revealed that Isaac's wound was indeed minor. The bullet had grazed his side, painful but not life-threatening. Herbert, however, was not so fortunate. The bullet had struck him in the chest, perilously close to his heart. Will he live? Genevieve asked as the doctor emerged from the back room where Herbert lay. It's too soon to say, Dr. Barnes replied, wiping his hands on a towel. The next 24 hours will be critical. I've done what I can, but he's lost a lot of blood, and there may be internal damage I can't see or treat. Isaac, his side bandaged, sat up carefully. What happens now? Now, said Sheriff Taylor from the doorway, I send a telegram to Prescott informing them of what's happened. And you two go home and try to put this behind you. There'll be an inquiry, of course, but with so many witnesses stating Wilson drew first, I don't anticipate any charges against you, Tucker. Genevieve helped Isaac to his feet, supporting him as they left the doctor's office. The street outside was still crowded with onlookers, all eager for news. He'll live, Genevieve announced, not entirely certain it was true but unwilling to fuel further speculation. Now please let us through. The crowd parted, and they made their way slowly toward the edge of town where Isaac had left his horse. Genevieve's parents were waiting there, their faces drawn with worry. We heard what happened, Jonathan said, embracing his daughter. Are you both all right? I'm fine, Genevieve assured him. Isaac's wound is minor. Herbert may not be so lucky. Margaret shook her head. Such a senseless thing, to come all this way seeking revenge for an imagined slight. Not imagined to him, Isaac said grimly. To a man like Wilson, being stood up to is the worst insult imaginable, especially by a woman and a saddle tramp. He winced as he shifted his weight. I never wanted to shoot anyone, but he didn't leave me much choice. No one blames you, son, Jonathan assured him. From what everyone is saying, you had no choice. They helped Isaac onto his horse, and Genevieve mounted behind him, unwilling to let him ride alone in his injured state. As they set off for the ranch, she couldn't help looking back at the town, wondering if Herbert Wilson would live to see morning and what would happen if he did. The answer came 2 days later, as Genevieve and Isaac were making final preparations for their wedding. Sheriff Taylor rode out to the ranch, his expression solemn. Wilson died an hour ago, he announced without preamble. Never regained consciousness after the surgery. Genevieve sank onto a chair, the news hitting her harder than she'd expected. Herbert had been a cruel, vindictive man, but she had never wished him dead. I've sent word to Prescott, the sheriff continued. His family will likely come to claim the body. And Isaac, Genevieve asked, finding her voice. What does this mean for him? Nothing changes from a legal standpoint, Taylor assured her. It was clearly self-defense. Wilson came to town looking for a fight, drew first, and paid the price. No jury in the territory would convict Tucker. Isaac nodded, his expression grim. Thank you, Sheriff. Will you let us know when the Wilsons arrive? I'd like to express my condolences despite everything. Taylor looked surprised but nodded. I will, though I doubt they'll be in a mood to receive them. After the sheriff left, Genevieve turned to Isaac. Are you all right? This can't be easy for you. Taking a life never is, Isaac said quietly. Even when you have no choice. But I'm more concerned about you, Genevieve. This all happened because you had the courage to stand up for what's right. I don't want you to regret that." "I don't," she assured him, taking his hands in hers. "I can't regret doing what I knew was right, even if the consequences were far beyond anything I could have imagined." Isaac lifted one hand to cup her cheek. "That's why I love you, Genevieve Foster. Your moral compass always points true north, no matter the cost." She leaned into his touch. "What about the wedding? Should we postpone?" "Absolutely not," Isaac said firmly. "Life goes on, Genevieve. Herbert Wilson made his choices. We're making ours. I want to marry you tomorrow as planned." "Then marry me you shall," she replied, reaching up to kiss him softly. The following day dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself approved of their union. The small church in Cedar Springs was filled to capacity as Genevieve walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Her simple white dress, adorned with wildflowers Mary had gathered that morning. Isaac waited at the altar, his dark eyes never leaving hers as she approached. Despite the events of the past few days, or perhaps because of them, there was a new depth to his gaze, a recognition of how precious and fragile life could be. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, the couple exchanging vows they had written themselves. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac gathered Genevieve into a gentle embrace, mindful of his healing wound, and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. The celebration afterward was subdued but joyful, the community coming together to wish the newlyweds well. Mary Holbrook, looking happier and more at ease than Genevieve had ever seen her, managed the refreshments with quiet efficiency, already at home in her new life. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town square, Archibald Wilson arrived from Prescott, accompanied by several men including Sheriff Drake. A hush fell over the gathering as the banker approached Isaac and Genevieve. "Mr. and Mrs. Tucker," he said formally, his face a mask of grief and barely suppressed rage. "I understand congratulations are in order." "Mr. Wilson," Isaac replied, his tone respectful. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss." "If there had been any other way, spare me your platitudes, Tucker," Wilson interrupted. "My son is dead because of your wife's interference in matters that didn't concern her, and your inability to teach her proper respect." Genevieve stiffened, but Isaac's hand on her arm kept her silent. "Your son is dead because he chose to pursue a vendetta across 50 miles of desert," Isaac corrected quietly. "Because he drew his gun on an unarmed man in front of 20 witnesses. I regret the outcome more than I can express, but the choice was his, not ours." Wilson's face flushed with anger. "You think this is over? You think you can kill a Wilson and simply go on with your lives? There will be consequences, Tucker. I promise you that." "There already have been consequences," Genevieve said, finding her voice at last. "A young man is dead, families are grieving, and a community has been shaken. Isn't that enough, Mr. Wilson? When does it end?" "It ends when I say it ends," Wilson snarled, but Sheriff Taylor stepped forward then, placing himself between the banker and the newlyweds. "That's enough, Wilson," he said firmly. "You're here to collect your son's body, not to threaten my townsfolk. Do your business and go." For a moment it seemed Wilson might argue, but then he deflated slightly, the grief momentarily overwhelming the anger. "Very well. We'll depart as soon as arrangements are complete. But this isn't over, Tucker. Not by a long shot." As Wilson walked away, Genevieve leaned against Isaac, suddenly exhausted. "Will it ever truly be over?" she whispered. "It will," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Archibald Wilson is angry and grieving now, but even his influence has limits in this territory. And we have a life to build, Genevieve. A good life, right here." She looked around at the community that had welcomed them, at her parents, who had supported her even when it cost them everything, at Mary, who had found refuge and a new beginning here, and finally at Isaac, whose steady strength and unwavering principles had changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Yes," she agreed, smiling up at her husband. "We do have a life to build, and we're going to make it a good one." In the months that followed, Archibald Wilson made good on his threat to cause trouble. He filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Isaac, though it was eventually dismissed due to the overwhelming evidence that Herbert had been the aggressor. He attempted to leverage his banking connections to deny loans to Cedar Springs businesses, though this effort largely failed as the town's economy was already diverse and self-sufficient. But life in Cedar Springs continued despite these challenges. Genevieve's school flourished, with more families moving to the area as word spread of the quality of education their children could receive. Jonathan's store became the center of commerce for the growing community, with Mary proving herself an invaluable assistant. And the Tucker Ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management, slowly expanding as they acquired additional land and cattle. By the following spring, Genevieve had news of her own to share. On a warm evening, as they sat on their porch, now adorned with the rocking chairs Isaac had crafted during the winter months, she took her husband's hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "Isaac," she said softly, "we're going to have a baby." The joy that spread across his face was answer enough, but he gathered her into his arms nonetheless, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. Oh, Genevieve, are you happy?" She asked, though she already knew the answer. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he assured her, pulling back to look into her eyes. "You've given me everything, Genevieve, a home, a purpose, a family. I can never thank you enough for that." "You don't need to thank me," she said, cupping his face in her hands. "You gave me the courage to stand by my convictions when it would have been easier to look away. You stood beside me when no one else would. That makes you brave, not wrong." Isaac smiled, recognizing his own words from that fateful day in Prescott. "We're quite a pair, aren't we, Mrs. Tucker?" "We are indeed, Mr. Tucker," she agreed, settling back against him to watch the sunset. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." As the years passed, the shadow of the Wilson family receded from their lives. Archibald Wilson died 2 years after his son, leaving his banking empire to a nephew who had no interest in continuing old vendettas. The wrongful death lawsuit was formally withdrawn, and Cedar Springs continued to grow, eventually rivaling Prescott in size and importance. The Tucker family grew as well. Their firstborn, a son they named Jonathan after Genevieve's father, arrived in the winter of 1879, followed by a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1881, and another son, David, in 1884. Each child inherited their parents' strong moral compass and sense of justice, though fortunately none was ever tested as severely as Genevieve had been. Mary Holbrook remained a part of their extended family, eventually marrying a widowed rancher and raising his 3 children as her own, along with 2 more they had together. She never forgot what Genevieve had done for her, and the 2 women remained the closest of friends throughout their lives. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Isaac and Genevieve hosted a celebration at their ranch, now one of the largest and most successful in the territory. Friends and family gathered from near and far, including Genevieve's parents, who had retired from running the store but remained active in community affairs. As the sun set on the gathering, Isaac found his wife standing alone at the edge of their property, looking out over the land they had cultivated together. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Tucker," he said, slipping an arm around her waist. Genevieve leaned into his embrace, as comfortable and natural as breathing after a decade together. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how different my life might have been if I'd looked the other way that day in Prescott." "You wouldn't have been you if you had," Isaac said simply. "And I might never have noticed you if you hadn't stood up to Wilson. So as difficult as that time was, I can't bring myself to regret it." "Nor can I," Genevieve agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "Every choice I've made, every stand I've taken has led me here to this life with you and our children. I wouldn't change a moment of it." Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch as gentle as it had been on their wedding day. "You know, when I told you that standing up for Mrs. Holbrook made you brave, not wrong, I never imagined where those words would lead us." "To the best kind of life," Genevieve said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "One built on courage, principle, and love." As they walked back toward their home, where their children played with cousins and friends in the fading light, Genevieve reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a dusty street in Prescott to a thriving ranch in Cedar Springs, from strangers to partners in every sense of the word, from uncertainty to the deepest kind of certainty. She had been cast out for defending another woman, but in doing so, she had found her true home and the love of her life. And that, she knew, was a trade worth making 100 times over. "Come on," Isaac said, squeezing her hand. "Our family's waiting." And together, they returned to the light and laughter of the home they had built, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else, side by side, with courage and conviction, brave but never wrong.